Hello and welcome to the Controller Talk podcast presented by Danfoss North America. Our goal is to bring you information about using Danfoss controls in the supermarket and warehouse industry, specifically in the US and Canada. We're doing these twice a month for now. You can catch these podcasts wherever you get your podcast, and it's also available through the Danfoss Ref Tools app. For the video version, check us out on the Danfoss North America YouTube page. Search for Controller Talk to see our video collection. I'm Dave Yoder, along with Chris Brown. Chris, we're on the cusp of the pinnacle of college basketball season at this point.
Good forward to it. Maybe it's because Maryland's doing so good right now. Although they had a heartbreaker last week. Half-court buzzer beater.
Well, Michigan State beat them at the buzzer.
They moved up in the rankings after that, though.
Oh,
they're 13th. They're up to 13 now.
Did that 4-point win over Penn State at the end of the game help them at all?
I was going to leave it out of. You brought it up.
Well, I mean, come on. You said it's the first time in 10 years they've won in-state college, so.
They said that on the broadcast. I was surprised.
Yeah.
And then you had the number one got upset last night. Auburn lost.
Ooh, okay. So, it's wide open this year.
Tournament, conference tournament this weekend, and then the good stuff.
Yeah, UConn's not going to just march in there and run the table, I think is the right term this year. Hey, I've got words to live by for you.
Let's go.
Okay. If at first you don't succeed, skydiving is not for you.
I'm with you.
Okay.
I'm on.
Keep that in mind.
Same wavelength now. That could apply to a lot of things, probably.
Probably
Scuba
so.
diving.
Yeah. Trimming trees and flip-flops and stuff like that, blindfolded.
Yeah, right.
Probably right. Yeah. All right. So every once in a while, you more than I, but the questions start to come in about our pack controllers and oil management.
Yeah.
And we may have touched on this in season 2 at some point, but don't think we spend a whole lot of time on it. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on it today either, but we're going to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we'll tease people with a Danfoss device that's related to all this stuff that they may not have heard of, probably haven't seen yet, but we'll talk about it.
Yep.
So, when it comes to pack controller oil management, sometimes we don't get involved at all because there's other devices like the Cree one, and I think Copeland has one that handles all the oil management for the compressors.
Yep.
So in general, I see oil management as a couple different things. Typically, you've got an oil separator, at least one, and you need to move oil from the separator into the receiver, and you need to make sure that the compressors have the oil they need.
I'm with you.
So that seems to be the goal here.
Yep.
And there are different theories about how to do all that. So it looks like in the pack controller, you can have more than one oil separator. And so you can program it to have one or two.
Yeah. And
then a lot of times we like to use relays and pulse that oil from the separator to the receiver.
Yep.
But a lot of it's about theory of what the maybe the OEM or the compressor manufacturer wants to see. And then we just program the pack controller based on what they're after.
Yeah. It's because you're talking, so if we're dealing with pack controllers right now in our market, we're looking at CO2 primarily.
Yeah, exactly.
So we know that's part of the equation here. And for us in the pack controllers, just to speak to what we see today, it's what you're going to see set up in the pack controller isn't to control the individual feed of the oil into the compressors. That's something we had done years ago for a while, but just the way kind of things shifted, it's now we're really only looking at the pack controller to be able to control a solenoid valve that's going to sit there between the separator and the oil reservoir, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, the way we do it, it's there's a couple different levels to it, because we want to make sure we're trying to take everything into account for when we might want to open that solenoid up. So on the separator side, one of the things that we're going to look at there is a level switch. And so for us, we give a little bit of flexibility. It could either be a switch that's sensing a high oil level in the separator to say it's time to to move oil into the reservoir and start a sequence that we'll talk about in a second. You could also have just a low-level switch where we start those sequences in timer-based logic, basically, and then we say, all right, once I sense that the separator is low on oil, I know I don't have any more to move over to the reservoir, and I'll stop opening that solenoid up.
Makes sense.
Or you could have both. You could just have nothing that's based on any sort of time whatsoever, and just say when I go high on oil, start to open the solenoid up in pulses. And once we say that we're low on oil in the separator, then stop and just close it off. Okay. And like you said, that relay, it is pulsing pretty frequently. It's not just open for a few minutes, closed. So it does need to be on a solid state relay on the pack controller, which you'll see sometimes guys will go in, and if they get into the nitty gritty of the addressing of the pack controller points, you don't have the ability to set a polarity on the oil solenoid because it's assuming that it's going on a solid state relay.
Yeah. So what do you do if you have ejectors and oil pulsing? Yeah,
so you've got the 4 solid states on the main board, and then there's that little Molex connector off to the bottom left.
Yep.
You can actually take a whip off of that, and that gives you additional wiring to go to just external solid states to give you another, I think it's 4 additional you get for 8 total.
Okay, and they would have their own input or their own assignments.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, they're like 20 through 23-ish, something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, they'd have their own assignments that the pack controller would know how to control them.
I'll ask you on a stump, Chris, what those numbers are.
That's good. As long as there's not a bill in Congress for it, I think I'll be all right. So if we get into a situation there where we say we're high on oil and we want to start to open, it's not just a full open, like we said, it's pulsing. And so something else you'd see in the pack controller setup is where you can set up how many cycles we run through when we open or when we want to open when we're high in the separator. And then for each cycle that we're opening, it's how much time do we spend open and how much time do we spend closed for each of those cycles.
Okay.
So those are the things that we're doing as we say we want to move that oil from one position to the other. And then as we run through what we consider a full set of cycles, which is configurable, then we can have a small delay where we say, or if we're still showing high oil in the separator afterwards, do it all again.
So you have a pause and then you start it all over.
Yeah, and it can be immediate. You can set it at 0 and just kind of continue on, or you could set it in 1-minute intervals.
Okay.
To do that. In addition to that, you can also have some other things that we're looking at to say when we need to start this whole pulsing sequence on top of just the oil level sensors in the separator. So one could just be a timer-based thing where you can say every 15 minutes or 30 minutes. I think it's in increments of 15 that you can set it for. But every so often, you can also say, hey, I know just based off of time, there's a good chance I need to open this thing up regardless of what my sensors are saying. Let me go ahead and run through a pulse sequence now.
Yeah.
2 other things you have the option for there is also starting to look at pressure. So you could either add a pressure transducer right into the oil reservoir. So not the separator, but the reservoir now we're talking about.
Or the receiver. Yep.
Receiver.
Yep.
To say that we know that the pressure's low and we need to build it up higher. Or you could also look at differential pressure across the oil receiver and the liquid receiver. Because we know that that's helping to build up pressure in there to get it to push into the compressors.
Okay.
And so for either one of those 2, if we drop too low on that just straight pressure in the reservoir or too low on that differential pressure, we're going to open that up to help force oil to where they can feed into the compressors also.
Okay.
So pressure comes into play with potentially an extra pressure transducer that you might not have had otherwise.
It seems like you see a lot of just alarming on low levels right now. But I'm sure we're doing some pulsing where we're moving it from the separator to the receiver for oil too.
Yep.
Yeah. And I did see an interesting alarm in there that if you have the 2 level setup where you have a high and a low in the separator, if it says that it's closing the high level switch, but the low level switch is not closed, it'll alarm on that because that should not happen.
Yeah, obviously. If something's not wired right or something's broken.
We know there's not a big air bubble in the bottom of the
Yeah.
receiver or the separator. So, yeah.
Most people today aren't using both in the separator. Most of what we're seeing is just put the high level switch in to tell us when to start.
Okay.
And I'll tell you how many cycles I want to run through. And
Yeah.
they might set the cycles really low because you have that repeat feature where you could just say, do 2 or 3 cycles. And if I'm still showing high, then do it again. But don't run through 30 cycles blindly.
Okay.
When maybe I'm not open, or I'm opening it when I don't need to, rather.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Yep. And then, so if we move on to this other device, this is something Danfoss released a year or two ago, I think. Mm-hmm. It's called the COM, or compressor oil management device.
Yep.
It's meant to bolt onto the compressor.
It is.
And I think it's got some adapters and things like that to be able to fit to different compressors. Mm-hmm. So with something like this, at least in the States, we need UL approval for this kind of thing. And then you also need the OEMs to qualify it.
Sure.
So where are we with all that?
UL's coming, so that's still being worked on here. We're hoping to have that. We should have it sometime this year. So hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's your module that senses the oil level in the compressor itself, and then we'll also feed the oil into it based on what it sees on that level. And it comes in 2 variations. So you've got a COM10 and a COM20, and it's really just pressure levels that differentiate the two. I'm looking at it here now. The 10C module or model can get you up to 870 PSI for your max working pressure. The 20 is 1885. So really, whether it's subcritical, transcritical for a CO2 compressor, that's probably going to dictate a little bit of that. Definitely, if it's a transcritical or a medium temp compressor or a parallel, you're going to be going with the 20C.
Yep. Okay. And it's got a sight glass in it.
It does.
And that has a lot to do with how it operates. And I believe there's 3 levels in there. There's a sensor in there that looks at 3 different levels.
Yeah.
The first one is normal, and I think the middle one, is that called critical? And
I
then
think you're right.
Yeah. And then the last one is alarm, if you get down too low.
And one of the things I've noticed with them, just comparing them against some of the competitor models, is the size of it. It's a little skinnier.
Okay.
So it maybe isn't as hard to work with if you got compressors on a rack frame that are pretty tight. Up against each other. It's a little easier to got to replace it or clean it or whatever you're doing with it, but it's a little easier to get to it than some others might be.
Okay. Any installations in Europe that you're aware of at this point?
I know that they've installed. I don't know exact customers or anything, and I know that Bach is going to make that a regular accessory option for the Bach compressors too.
An accessory or a standard part?
It's a standard, although it'll be an option. So really the Bach compressors, a lot of that is kind of a la carte when you say, what all do I want to add to it? You get a few base things, but things like that are going to be, they can add it in the factory for you, but you'd have to kind of specify that you want it. Okay.
Would you like to jump right to the Stump Chris question?
Kind of. Hesitantly, yes.
It'd probably be considered open notes since you got a document open there.
I'll just close it out. Go ahead.
Oh, too bad.
Yeah.
So you can alarm out of this little guy, this COM device. What's the alarm delay on that?
Crud. I should have kept them open. Alarm, 5 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. So that would be 300 seconds.
It would.
It's 80 seconds.
Darn.
Yeah. And the document goes into all kind of detail about what happens if you are on a variable speed drive and it ramps up and your oil level drops suddenly. It talks about how it overcomes that and doesn't give you nuisance alarms and that sort of thing. So, yeah. So that's the only thing I know about it is the alarm delay. I'll leave the rest to you for now.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So we got Stump Chris all taken care of.
Again.
Yeah.
Glad I didn't disappoint.
Well, I'm here to educate, of course. As far as listener mail, I don't have any of that. So why don't we'll wrap this baby up, and then we were just talking about probably doing 2 more for this season, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty of summer. But as far as this episode goes, if you would like to drop us an email with a suggestion for topics or a question or a comment or anything, you can always email us at controllertalknorthamerica@danfoss.com. Thanks for listening. Maria is the audio engineer, video engineer, and everything engineer here right now once again. And until next time, for Chris Brown, I'm Dave Yoder. Stay cool.